Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Cheyenne Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Cheyenne Hills at CheyenneHills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
Across the street and around the world, Cheyenne Hills.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. And we are again here with another school board candidate, Dr. Todd Reynolds. Dr. Reynolds, thank you for joining us today. And like I've told others, we've had Nathan Winters as a part of this this questioning before, and he's still out of town this week. And so I'm going to ask him some of those questions. I've got a few questions of my own. I want you to be able to share your views and whatever you have kind of on your heart. But let's just start out with Dr. Reynolds. Who are you? What do you do? And really, and also tell us about what quadrant you're running. And I believe this is the first time you've run for this particular position.
Second time for this one.
Okay,
I
you've
ran
run
6 years
before,
ago, yes.
but you've not served before. Okay,
Right.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Tell us about Dr. Reynolds.
Right. First of all, I'm just to tell you about why I'm running again.
Okay. I'm
running to give back to this district because this district gave me the foundation that I needed to be in my dream job.
Okay.
So I went to school here, kindergarten, actually before kindergarten, through high school, graduated from Central, got my first teaching job at Central.
Okay.
So I want to give back to this place because it gave me everything.
Nice.
So part of that serving then is serving in my area of expertise. So I am a teacher, I'm an educator. I'm in my 25th year of teaching right now.
Wow.
In that time, I have taught high school English. I've taught 5th grade. I was an elementary literacy coach, and I'm now teaching at the university, training future English teachers. I've also trained future elementary teachers as well.
Very good.
So that's my career.
Quite a
where I've
career.
been,
Yeah, that's great.
I'm also an educational researcher, so I have articles published in the Harvard Educational Review, in Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy,
Wow.
and a number of other journals. So I'm actively researching and writing in my field. And I have an EDS in educational leadership and a PhD in literacy education. So education is my life. It is what I do. It is my passion.
Yeah.
So as I'm running to give back to the community, running for a school board is my area. So that's why I'm running for a school board.
Very good. Awesome. And you're running for which quadrant?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm running for the Central Triad.
You're in the Central Triad.
So I was born and raised in the Central Triad. So
Okay.
I went to school at Davis, then Hobbs, McCormick, and Central. I got my first teaching job at Central, like I said. So
Very good.
that's where I've spent the majority of my life. Actually.
Yeah,
So,
fantastic. Very good. Well, I'm gonna lead off with a question. I've tried to ask the same questions to every potential school board person, so we have some kind of a consistency. And I really appreciate you coming in today. This is one that Nathan had, and I'm just going to read it. It says, in a recent news report from Sweetwater County here in Wyoming, read the concerns from local parents who were told that the school district had every right to withhold information from parents regarding how their children would present themselves at school. This has created a scenario where parents would be informed about the children who received an ibuprofen for a headache and yet not talk about their identity. Now, I think there was an addendum to this, is actually the teachers were said that they must not speak to the parent about what's going on with their children's identity. Your thoughts on this? If this would come to school board and you're on the school board, how would you handle this?
Well, the wording becomes important first, so we'd have to have the actual wording of that. But teachers operate under the idea of duty to report. So when I'm watching a student, when I'm in a classroom, I have a duty to report instances of either harm or potential harm. So harm that has happened or harm that might happen in the future. So we go through trainings for this every year. I just had to go through mine at UW this last spring. So our duty to report centers around that idea of harm. With this particular thing, without seeing the order, I don't know what the actual order says, so I don't know what the actual wording of this is. But a way a student presents at a school doesn't necessarily lead to harm. So if it doesn't lead to harm, then that duty to report is not going to necessarily be there.
Won't kick in.
Right.
Gotcha.
Now, if we look at that student who's presenting a certain way and we think that there might be some sort of abuse, friend abuse, family abuse, some other sort of abuse, sort of self-abuse, some self-harm, then that becomes a duty to report. And then there's a process for going through that reporting process, who we have to go to, and there's a very set chain for what we need to do. But that's why. So when you look about the ibuprofen, the Tylenol issue, which is a really separate issue at this point, because that's medication versus presenting. With Tylenol, what could happen, I could see this happening with my girls, my lovely girls. At 2 o'clock or so, she could go to the office and say, I've got a bad headache. I've got a horrible headache. And can you help me? And the nurse would possibly, according to the rules of the school, give some Tylenol. If that same, she came home then at 3:30 or 4 o'clock and said, still, I have a headache. I have this going on. It hurts. My idea as a parent would be to give her Tylenol again, right? But that'd only be 2 hours later. So now all of a sudden I'm doubling up on the acetaminophen, doubling up on the medicine. So that could cause harm. So if I don't, as a teacher or as a nurse, communicate to the parents that we've given them Tylenol, we set up the potential for harm.
Yeah.
Just even if the parent is trying to do the right thing. So we have to communicate about those things. So it's a very, very separate and very different issue.
So what they're doing in school really, and I think you're maybe answering that next question. The next question is kind of akin to it in the sense of who's the client in education. Let's just go with that one.
The students are our most important focus. So we have 14,000 students in this district, and our focus is on all 14,000 of those students. That is our priority. That's how we make our decisions, is what's best for those students. We also watch for the teachers. There are 2,300 faculty and staff in this district, and our job is to create policies and procedures that will help them do their jobs as well. Other than that, though, we are trustees, and trustees are different than representatives. Trustees are elected to serve the board, to run the board, and to serve the district, but a representative would be elected to represent the people, to represent the voters. A trustee is voted simply to run. They have been given the trust to run the school board. Mm-hmm. So we need to listen to parents. We need to listen to community members. We need to listen to what's happening out everywhere else. But our focus is the 14,000 students and 2,300 faculty and staff in our buildings.
So students number one, parents kind of, in your order, you think students are number one, teachers number two, and parents number three. It's kind of how you rank yours.
Because our job is policies and procedures as the school board. So as we create those policies and procedures, they need to equitably apply to all 14,000 students and all 2,300 faculty and staff. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is going to do that. It's going to equitably apply to everyone there. That
kind of falls into the kind of question I've asked. I interviewed a school board, not interviewed here per se. This was more just offline, and I knew this school board's particular values, and yet in some of the policies that were being in place, this is a current school board person, and the question I had is like, well, you have values that I align with as we sit here and talk, but yet when it comes down to implementing those in policy, it seems like those values are checked at the door. And I just have been asking everybody, do you think values should impact how you vote on some of these issues that are very values based? Do you check that at the door, or how do you deal with the values part?
So values are what allow us to look ourselves in the mirror every day. Sure. I think about it as the shopping cart test, honestly. Are you the person that returns the shopping cart, or are you the person who leaves the shopping cart out in the parking lot? Okay. Because at that point, you get no recognition for it. You get no claim or praise for it, either whether you do it or you don't. No one's really watching it. It's just a matter of who you are and what you're going to do. Those values become very, very important because with whatever decision we make, we have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror. We have to be able to live with the decisions that we have. But every role that we go to is going to have certain responsibilities and certain necessities of that particular role. So what we also have to do is look at what the requirements of that role that we're looking to be in are. So for a school district, our requirement, our role, our job is the equitable application of policy to all 14,000 students. There might be times when that conflicts with me personally. So I have to look at what the greater good is. And the greater good for this role as a school board is what's equitable for 14,000 students. Now, if I find myself in conflict with that role on a number of occasions, or with that position, then it tells me that I'm in the wrong role. Instead of running for a public school, I might be running for a private school or a religious school. But a public school, we take every single child, every single family. So we have to represent and make sure that our policies cover all 14,000. It's an atheist family, it's a Christian family, a Muslim family, a Jewish family, and everything in between. So that becomes our focus. And again, if I conflict with that, then maybe a public school board wouldn't be the right place.
Okay, good answer. But to follow up with that, then let me just push that a little further. Then, so there's a book that I've been presented with there. I've got a lot of curriculum questions. That's kind of how I got into some of this. I got kind of dragged in because of some curriculum and more on the morality, whether this is appropriate, age appropriate. I want to talk about that in a second. But there's another book that I kind of came in contact with as I was in this process, and it was about Hinduism. And it talked a lot about Hinduism, and I asked, why is this book even as a part of the whole curriculum? The answer was very much what you say. Hey, there may be some Hindu kids. We need to be sensitive to those. It's like, okay, so where's the Christian? Can Christian value book be in the curriculum as well? And if so, where are they?
They're all over. Because they are.
Are you okay?
So,
well, we're going to disagree on that, but
that's fine. But the facts of teaching, especially American history in this country, are going to necessarily be Christian because the Christian religion has dominated this country for the last 400 years. Yeah. So it's necessarily there. It's necessarily built into things. Our Wyoming state constitution requires.
I get what you're saying here, but that is a good point. Historically, I get that, but it's because some of these were Christian or the Pilgrims or whatever like that. I get that, but as far as biblically values, this one talked about, the values of this particular religion, and I was told it's like, well, I've been told the same thing. It's like, well, yeah, but there are Christian books as well. And it's like, well, I haven't seen them.
Those two courses that I had when I was at Central were philosophy classes.
Okay.
One was a Western philosophy class. One was an Asian philosophy class. In the Western philosophy class, you do study biblical concepts. You study the great philosophers that went through. In the Asian philosophy class, we read the Buddhist scriptures. You read the Upanishads. You read the Analects, the Tao Te Ching, a number of those texts as well. And the thing about them all, and our board policy actually talks about this as well, we need to teach the religions objectively because they are a part of history. They are a part of the cultures. They are a part of the world. So we teach them objectively. We just lay out what the fundamental beliefs are of them, and then we move on to the next thing. So when we studied the Upanishads, we laid out what the Upanishads talked about, what they said, and then we moved on to the next thing after that, the Buddhist scriptures after that, same kind of thing.
Okay. So in keeping the curriculum question, now talking more on the things that have to deal with morality, we've got a lot of books that are in libraries. Now I've got to make sure I distinguish. There's curriculum, they're not curriculum. There's books that are in libraries that are not necessarily in curriculum. And
right.
Sometimes I mix those up and I don't mean to, but I know there's a difference. But there are books in our libraries for sure the junior high and high school level that are, I don't know if you're familiar with them or, because you're in the college level, I don't know how much exposure you have, but I would say from when I look at them, it's like, well, yes, it's cartoon. Yes, it's drawings, but it's pornography from my view. Now I've been told it's like, no, that's not pornography. You're going to have this question is going to come up. And do you have what's your view on some of these things? I think one of the books I know it's in Natrona County because that's the question that was in here, the genderqueer, and there's a book about transitioning. And both of them are very graphic drawings and you go, why is this in our school system? And how are you going to deal with that when that comes to your table?
So there are two Supreme Court decisions to think about here. One is the Pico decision. And the Pico decision distinguishes between curriculum and libraries, which is what you were talking about. Okay. The curriculum becomes compulsory, and the board has a lot of leeway there because it is compulsory. Every student goes through that curriculum. Okay. Even within the curriculum, though, there are mandatory classes and there are elective classes, and there's a difference there as well. The library, though, is voluntary, and the library as that voluntary space has been protected by the Supreme Court as a place where there can be broader representation, there can be bigger things, and the board has to have a set policy then for how to choose those books. We have a really set policy in this district right now that's very good because our professional librarians, who are trained librarians, use the professional resources to determine what books are going to be appropriate or inappropriate. The second case then that is really important here is the Miller case. So we have the Miller test for what is considered obscene. You're calling it pornographic. In order to be considered obscene or pornographic, it has to meet the criteria of the three prongs of the Miller test. The first prong is taken in its entirety. What is the intent of the book? Is it merely a prurient intent? And the second one, is it patently degrading or offensive? And the third one, taken as a whole in its entirety. does it lack literary merit or artistic merit or scientific merit? So with genderqueer, have you had a chance to read genderqueer?
No, not read. I've read just what was in the. I think it was like Wyoming. Wyoming something daily.
Okay.
Cowboy.
Okay. So
And so in that, so there's that, and the pictures in there. Of course, they're they're blurred out because it's very graphic.
Right. So what happens here, the Miller test points out that it's very clear we have to look at the entirety of the book. If you don't look at the intent and context of the book, then you can't determine whether or not it's obscene or pornographic. You may like it. You may not like it. You may disagree with it, and that's fine. We have an opt-out policy specifically for that. But determining whether or not it's obscene, you have to look at the entirety of the book. And that book, I've had the opportunity to read that book. It is a powerful, gut-wrenching, heartbreaking book. And the images that are taken there are purposely taken out of context of what the story is, out of context of what the character is going through. But that's part of the purpose of some of the tactics the groups are using that want to take books out of the library. They're purposely taking things out of context, purposely using only small passages and trying to say that because these are obscene, because we don't like these, the entire book must be.
So do you think kids are going to read that whole entirety and not flip right to the pictures?
I think kids, if they choose to go read that book, again, remember the library is voluntary, right? If the kids choose to go read that book, then the kids are going to choose, if they choose that book in particular, there might be a reason for that.
So a school has this authority, I think. They have a certain kind of, if it's in the school library, then somebody adult has vetted it and said, okay, it's okay for it to be here. And it's either considered art or educational, is what kind of what you're telling me. There's parents that are going to go, okay, why should this be in there? And so I understand that there are cases behind this, but I think the part that I'm kind of curious about, if there are parents that come and say, hey, I object to this in some way, do you have any, what are you going to say to that parent? It's just the law of the land?
We have a beautiful policy in this district, an opt-out policy that allows parents who disagree with it to come to the librarian and say, I disagree with this book. I don't like this book. I don't want my kid to have it. And the librarian will work with that parent and make sure that that child doesn't check out that book.
So do you actually think that human nature is that somebody else won't check that out and they won't see that book? It's in the school?
That could happen just if they go to the public library.
That's different.
No. The student, though, could still take that book to the school and still show it to all their friends. So you can't make a decision based on whether or not someone else is going to give a book to you.
It's the same kind of argument, and I know where you're going. It's like with it's the same. Well, they can get it on their phones, so everything's fair game. And I don't know maybe the answer to that one. Honestly, that is certainly true. People have access to all kinds of things. No question about that.
So real quick though, this is why we have the Supreme Court guidance that we have. The Supreme Court guidance is what helps us determine what things are going to be considered obscene or not. And so our professional resources, which is what librarians are using, know that Miller test very, very well. So as they're reviewing books, as they're writing their reviews for librarians to determine whether or not it's appropriate, they have that Miller test in mind. Because we have that Supreme Court guidance, we're able to make those decisions.
And which really is a big umbrella. There's pretty much anything can go under that. The age appropriateness is just another one that we're talking about junior high school things, and that's one area. When it comes to the children, the reason I got involved in this whole debate was because of a book that was on the second grade classroom, in the classroom, not in the library. It's not a part of the curriculum. It's a library book, but it's on the shelf in the second grade classroom. And a family that I know, their child got exposed to this, and there was like, okay, what should we do? And so this whole thing is like, wow. Do you have a thought on age appropriateness? In this particular case, it was same-sex attraction. It was a book that was, in my view, certainly it was written to the audience would be a junior high audience. It was in a second grade classroom, and I was told the whole thing was, well, a parent can opt out. And is there any place, I guess when I'm trying to ask you this question, I know we're dealing with it's a difficult situation, but is there any place that you say, there's an age appropriateness and this is not appropriate for this age group? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So we have that with, again, going back to those professional resources, that is exactly what they do. So I can't speak to a book that I don't have a title for in a classroom.
Drama.
I don't know.
You know that book?
I
Drama?
don't know drama.
Okay.
I know drama well.
All right.
So drama was challenged in this district a few years ago.
Okay.
It was brought up and tried to be challenged, taken out of the libraries.
Right.
I was on the committee actually that made the recommendation to this superintendent about that book.
Okay.
So yes, I know the book, and it is. Again, you look at the context and intent of that book. The same-sex attraction in that book was a side story. It was a side character, and it happened on just a couple of pages. So the intent of the book was not even focused on that. So I can't speak about a second grade classroom, but that book my daughter read that would have been third or fourth grade as I was preparing for this, and she loved it. She got the rest of the books by that particular author. So that actually speaks to why these policies and procedures are so important, because they have to equitably apply to all 14,000 students. We can't let some people censor things for everybody else, right? It has to be
So really,
applicable and
you're saying that
equitable
there
to
really
everybody.
is nothing age-wise. It's nothing really is off limits. Is that
No,
what
I'm not saying that.
Well,
So I'm saying that
drama was
there are
definitely-
professional resources that give you the age groups. And again, I can't speak to a hypothetical here in a classroom that I don't know, that I wasn't part of. I don't know why it was in that classroom,
Yeah.
so I can't speak to that. But I do know that book was elementary appropriate, especially for upper elementary, which is when my daughter read it. And again, those age recommendations are there in the reviews, and our teachers and librarians, our professional librarians, know what those limits are.
Yeah.
Books in the classroom is a separate issue. It is a different thing. What I'm telling my students right now, I just had a discussion on Tuesday, is that the books that they have in their classroom should be books that are also available in the library, so that they know that it's been through that process. Because if it's been through that process, as you said, it has been vetted, it has gone through our board policy, it has gone through the professional reviews.
Right. Anything else that you have that you want to swerve toward? I didn't ask.
One of the biggest problems that I'm seeing right now in our community, we've seen it this week, seen it the last couple of weeks. The hate and vitriol has gotten so bad that it has actually distracted the board from doing the work of the board.
Yeah.
So you've seen the board in the last couple of years be forced to deal with things they shouldn't be dealing with, such as the book policies, the library book policies are written. The board doesn't have a place right now in removing books. So they tried to call a work session to see if they could change policy. The majority said they shouldn't change policy, which is right, because the board doesn't have a place there. So that was a case where they were listening to a script. They were following what they were told to follow, certain board members. And then they were trying to take the board off the direction of what it was trying to do.
Wow.
We saw that with the Wyoming School Board Association, with the letter that was written there, also is taking off the focus and being basically just following a script.
What is it? This is a great question then. What is a parent to do? Where is the place to say, I have a grievance here about
Yes.
but where do you go?
There is a board policy for that.
Okay.
So what the first step is to talk to the teacher or talk to the librarian.
Okay.
If that decision or that discussion isn't satisfactory, the next step goes to the principal.
Okay.
And then there's a set process that the principal then will start walking the teacher through from that point on.
Okay.
It's walking the parent through from that point on. So that policy is set up specifically in chapter 9, I believe it is, of board policy. So it's there, and that's exactly what they need to do. But what they can't do is where the hate comes in, which is target teachers online, throw pictures online. So we've seen that right now this week in this community. We've seen pictures of worksheets go on. We've seen teachers targeted. We've seen teachers being bullied online.
Yeah.
And that's what the adults in this community need to stand up and say, we cannot have this.
Yeah.
We cannot treat our teachers or our students this way.
No, I totally agree with you. And that somebody else came in and said the same thing. And it's like, well, I just want you to know, as a church, I am not supporting of hate. I'm not supporting of violence. I'm not supporting any of those things ever.
Right.
Our mandate is to speak truth and speak it in love, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's our mandate, to be kind. I mean, all those things. But I will tell you, it is difficult to, get your voice heard. I mean, because even the policy you just laid out, I walked a parent through those very things.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the teacher, we went to the principal. Principal said it's over my head. I went to the person they said. It led right to the school board, and that's where I walked this family with this process. That's why I'm here today, interested in this school board, because this is where we came to. And I speaking truth in love, the very best I possibly can, asking questions. How can we get this? Can we get this? Here's my main thing, is Dr. Reynolds, is that can we agree to one thing? I know we disagree on a lot of range of things. Okay, we're not going to come to agreement on what pornography is or not.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to solve that today. Could we agree that there's a certain age of innocence that we could try to protect the innocence of our children? That's the one thing I don't think that's a hate thing to say. Can we do that? And here's some things that I'm concerned about, or parents are concerned about. And then if we're concerned about those children, I'm talking about elementary children, then how can we, you say you gave the process. We've gone down that process and nothing can change. I've run into it's like, well, you've got to change the school board. The school board's got to address this.
So let's go with drama as an example real quick. Just because you go through a process doesn't mean you're going to get a solution that you like.
That's true. Yeah.
So they went through the process on drama and they walked all the way through it. And it went all the way up through a hearing. There was a public hearing on the book. And then there was a committee that met and gave the decision then to the superintendent. So the parent who brought that forth didn't necessarily like it, but that was the policy. That's how our country is.
Yeah.
We're a system of laws, not men. So we need to go through the laws. We need to follow the laws and follow the procedures.
Right.
But as far as that age of innocence, I understand what you're saying. And there is an age appropriateness for that age. But at the same time, we need to watch for representation too. Because if a child has two mothers or two fathers, for example, and is being told in kindergarten and first grade and second grade constantly that the only family is a mother and a father, the only family is mother and father, and that the only books that they see are books with mothers and fathers, then that child, when he goes home or when she goes home, is all of a sudden now questioning what's happening there at home.
So this to me is why can't that stay outside of education? Why can't we just have reading and writing and arithmetic and those? Why do we even have to address so-and-so has two mothers or what? Why do we even have to do that?
We address a mother and a father all the time, right? So even our princess tales talk about the heterosexual romance. So my daughter just last year went through a unit on Cinderella. And the unit on Cinderella is focusing constantly on the female and falling in love with the male coming in and saving her, right? So that's that kind of generalization that's still happening in kindergarten, first grade. Disney princess movies, especially the early ones, are all about that. So we see it with Snow White in particular and Sleeping Beauty. These are two where women are completely passive, where there's nothing that they actually do. The man comes in and saves them. And again, if you're from a house, a kindergarten, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, from a house that doesn't have that particular model, even a single family, a single parent house, and that's the only model that you see, you start to question your own identity at that point. You start to question your family at that point. So that's why representation, age-appropriate representation, but representation matters. Because those students should be able to see in text the different kinds of families that are there, because there's not just one kind of family. There's not just one kind of community. And that's where the kindergarten, first grade, second grade books become really, really good and really important, is because they just simply show that representation. And that's a very powerful thing for that child, especially. And for the rest of us who are in a traditional house, it's important for us to see those other families too, because that builds up our understanding and our empathy.
Well, sure. And we deal with brokenness of all kinds. In the church, that's what we deal with, is broken. And we don't, and we treat with kindness and with love and with all these things. And so I just want you to know that if there's vitriol that's coming out, it's, I hope it's not coming from the church in particular. It's just him trying to ask some really important questions that is near to my heart. Is there's this, and I've told people my why a time or two. It's like, Jesus said that if anyone causes one of these little ones who love me to stumble, it would be better to have a millstone wrapped around their neck and cast in the bottom of the sea. I think he was trying to protect the hearts and minds of these kids. And I understand what you're saying is there's kids on the margins that we need to try to help as well. Mm-hmm. And my question is that I've asked is like, so we're basically saying we've got to expose everybody, all these kids, to a bunch of things that some parents would prefer not to at that particular age. And I would agree. There's some things that's like, I don't understand why that, whether it's suicide ideation, whether it's same-sex attraction or whatever it is, why is that even in the classroom? Why can't we just keep that outside the classroom and protect the innocence of our kids? That's my that's my question. And I appreciate you've kind of given me some pathways, some ideas on how to maneuver that. So thanks for that. Any final words? Anything?
No, like I said, I'm trying to give back and serve this community in my area of expertise. I also teach young adult literature at UW as well. So I'm trying to give back in my area of expertise. Education is what I love. This district is what I love. My parents both taught here for 30 plus years as well. My mother was a graduate of Central. My kids have been going to Central schools.
That's awesome.
So this is my home. This is where I want to serve. And I'm serving in my area. I'm trying to serve in my area of expertise, which is education. That's
awesome. So. Well, it's great to meet you. Thanks for coming in today. And as we sign off today, I appreciate you tuning in. And I just challenge everybody in this program we have with Nathan. We usually have it here, and we always sign off by saying this, Dr. Reynolds, I say, to challenge people to, as you're going through this life, to be strong and very courageous. God bless you guys. Thanks.